it's like giving the body money, right? We're giving it at the lowest, simplest level, we're giving it more energy because red infrared light drives mitochondrial activity, which increases ATP production, and ATP is the base energy molecule for the body to do everything. So even if we just look at it there, what happens is we give the body more energy. And when it has more energy, it will allocate those resources to get to some of that deferred maintenance that it hasn't been getting to because we've been in a bit more of a survival mode. Because most of us aren't actually, in terms of our health, we're not living a middle class lifestyle. We're living more of in poverty. Our debt is exceeding our income, and we're building up a growing and growing debt. And that's our lack of vitality.
Well, Guy, so what you're doing is pretty amazing, but crazy too, maybe is the word, in a good way.
Yes.
And I think, we need folks like you pushing those boundaries, addressing mental health and everything that your backstory is really interesting. I know a little of it, but just to start off, give maybe a little background on you.
Sure. So if we go far enough back, I was, I was an early adopter in computers. So the personal computer came into existence right at about like when I was old enough to be able to get one. So it was perfectly timed, and so I absolutely fell in love with computers and computer programming. And I think I wrote my first piece of software when I was 15, like commercially sold my first piece of software at age 15, and and it was just, I think I assumed, everybody around me assumed that this was the direction I was going to go. And somewhere along the line, I laugh at this now, but the reason I didn't continue that was even in the few years that I had spent in the computer field, watching the rate of change.
Yeah.
I said, I, I will be in school for the rest of my life. And as a typical student, I didn't like school, and so that seemed like a bad thing to me. And so
What year are
I
we
didn't
talking?
want.
What year?
Oh boy, year. This would have been like mid
Oh,
80s,
wow.
like mid to late 80s, when I was kind of in this decision
Those are the
process.
punch card days
And
of programming, right? Punch cards, and
yeah,
yeah,
well, just past,
just after.
like
Okay.
we had the first computers, like when I came into it, we had the first, like like, well, really Apple, like the first Apple, the Apple II, the Apple IIe. But even before that, there was the Commodore and the Atari, and so they were, they had tiny amounts of memory, and you could write a program, to fill the entire memory of the computer, and then it couldn't do anything because it was all code and there was no RAM left to operate in, right? So this was, again, very early days, but just past the punch card. Uh, yeah. So, so that was my trajectory, early on, was that. But then I had this whole thing of like, that I'm going to have to be learning all the time. I don't want to do that. So I actually ended up in pre-med, and bodies seemed more like knowable. Like, this is a solved problem, right? So this is not going to be lifelong learning. Well, that joke's on me.
Right.
That was farthest from the truth it could have been. But my pre-med schooling, it wasn't going well, in the sense I wasn't enjoying the experience, and so eventually I ended up going to massage school, of all things. But what I found there was everything my medical education wasn't, which was, medical education was all about, anatomy and physiology and pathophysiology and biochemistry and all of that.
Yeah.
And then massage school was about people, and how to help people be healthy. And so we had a positivistic view as opposed to a negativistic view, right? And now there's an understanding of it, but then there wasn't an understanding, broad understanding of, say, like in psychology, you can have a positivistic psychology, right? And so we don't focus on mental health problems. We focus on pathology. We focus on what makes people healthy. So that mindset worked for me. So what I found over the arc of my career, so 30 some years, is this coming together of my kind of passion for healing and my passion for computers. And this has put me in this area of bioelectric
Mm.
medicine where I get to work with these two things, the idea of computation and human beings. And so really I could not have imagined the story working out this way, but it also could not have been more, kind of
Mm.
poetic.
Well, it's interesting
Uh,
going from pre-med to massage school. That's a not exactly a parent's dream, right?
and so here's the crazy thing. It was my mother's idea.
Interesting. Well, I stand
Yeah.
corrected. Well, good for her. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
I
that's
know.
that's the right thing to do for, that's a hard thing, societal norms pushing down on you. Oh, my son's a doctor, right? That's what people want to say, but you felt it was not the right thing. You got the support you needed, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, she could see my
Mm,
unhappiness and knew me well enough to know what was likely, a truer path for me. And she made the suggestion. I was like, that's like what an obtuse
right.
suggestion. I'm from a small town in Canada. Massage was not a thing. I ended up having to leave there, Canada, come down to the US because there wasn't a place to go to massage school.
Mm,
So it was such just an obtuse suggestion, but could not have been more like right on target.
yeah. And
And
why massage
so
school? Like, you obviously were in pre med. You're realizing this is not something's not. You're out of phase with what you learned. It's not right for you. You just knew it. And then the jump to massage school specifically. There's a lot of other things you could have. Why massage school? Like, what's so
sure.
specific?
So great
Yeah.
question. I love it. You're just drilling right down to
That's right.
the getting right to the details here. So actually, what happened was just outside of my academic world at all, I was a competitive fighter. So a friend of mine would come down to the U.S. to train, and I came down with him one time. I met a woman. So then, I've got this girlfriend here in the U.S. and I'm in Canada. We're doing the long distance thing, and so the massage thing from my side was it was never like, oh, massage, that would be interesting. It was massage, here's a way to go to the US
Mm.
and spend a year on my mom's dime and I get to hang out with my new girlfriend. So it was just that. I mean, it was just very typical
Yeah.
adolescent boy meets
Yeah,
girl.
yeah, yeah. We all like to
This is
say
what
we have
happened.
this perfect architecture in our head. How are we going to do? We can construct our lives, but reality is most of them happen like you just start. Like, oh, I did this. I don't know. I was kind of stupid, and this worked out, and things fall into place. Sort of, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I always say, like, the relationship didn't last, but the career did.
Mm,
And so yeah, exactly, it's one of those weird, the universe is a weird thing, and a series of events that seem unrelated really ended me up in a perfect situation.
that's fantastic. Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And it
yep,
just hearing you talk and just looking at some of your content, you just ooze like you're doing what you want to do. Right.
hmm,
And it's just, and it's, I wish
absolutely,
more folks would take that as a tiny lesson, like, because it's so easy to, I know I'm getting a little off topic here, but we'll get back. You were in this, highly, potentially this path of the most, highly regarded field, pre-med, those pressures start to build up of expectations. And you have to you have to jump off that train against the norms, right? You have to, and you did that. And I think, who knows, you could be a medical doctor today that making good money but miserable, right? Or stuck with the
correct.
2 3 houses, a vacation house, and that's because that what you do. People spend their money and then they're kind of stuck with the thing that pays their bills, and
Hmm.
it's so many of us. So you didn't do that, and I think that's a little lesson that shouldn't go understated, I think. But
Absolutely. I mean, there's a pro con in there, and the first career probably would have paid more if I'd stayed in computers.
hmm
And that likely would have been the most financially beneficial choice. The second, would have also been financially secure, but also status.
yeah,
A lot of status in that. Uh, but for whatever reason, whatever miswiring happened in me as a child, between my
yeah.
brother and I, he has made all of the right choices,
Hmm.
and and he's a wonderful human being, and I love him dearly. He's gone on to he went on to be a fireman, fantastic, and has saved a lot of
Mm,
lives, and very meaningful. A home builder, and so he's made all those good choices around what's going to give me a solid career and what's going to take care of me in my
hmm.
retirement, and he's done that and lived a beautiful life. I, on the other hand, kind of went in the other direction of what's going to make me happy,
Yeah.
right? Without a thought of what's my future, what's my, so I don't have a retirement plan. He's going to retire, and in his retirement will make more money annually than I make working.
But his
So,
definition
you
of
know,
working, he needs to retire from. Perhaps your definition of working is not really something you need to retire from because you genuinely enjoy
exactly.
it. So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that is the
Mm,
difference is I'm excited every day that I wake up about what I get to do.
mm,
And I can't wait to get going. And so yeah, I mean, my life is play.
mm,
I mean, I have work, and I run a big clinic, and there's lots of stresses and everything, but all of that is secondary to, I really feel that what I get to do every day is kind of unfolding my soul.
mm. I like that.
And so,
Yeah.
financial reward, no financial reward, stressful, not stressful, whatever, it's kind of, that's all secondary to, like, it's just grace,
Mm,
right? Every day is
yeah.
really grace.
Yeah. I wish more of us
And
valued that more than the status and the money because I think that's genuinely the path to happiness is waking up on a Monday morning and not looking forward to the weekend. Looking forward to the weekend, a little bit here and there is fine. But when you dread the Mondays, that's a problem no matter how much you're making. I don't care if you're making 10
yeah,
million a year. It's just not a good life. It's just not
it's
a good
not.
life.
And in many ways, and be careful when I say this, because who might listen, but in many ways, like, that's why I have a
Mm.
business, is in healthcare, is because most people are living asymmetric to their true desire, their true
Oh,
passion,
100%. Yeah.
and then they're that does not lead to happiness and health. It leads to
Chronic
chronic
illness. Yeah.
disease.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah. Between the
and
diet
and
and the
so
stress, we're basically just killing ourselves prematurely for some
yes,
sort of weird carrot that's out there that makes no sense except in the capitalistic, this is what we shall do. Yeah,
yes,
it's
yep,
I'm with you, and I'm a big fan of capitalism. By the way, not throwing stones. It's done more good, I think, than any system in the world. But we, as
correct.
humans, we can't really. Yeah, we don't know where that boundary is. So anyway, that's not really the topic of our conversation. But I just
Right,
wanted to highlight that because I think it's so important, and a lot of my previous episodes touch on that, and the folks that I get feedback from a lot really get value out of. Oh, I rethought some things hearing you guys talk, and I like that aspect of it. But so you had a really good example there. I just wanted to draw attention to. But anyway, what so Cerebral Fit is your now you have a few companies. So I appreciate your background as you kind of came through this. I think you're involved in a few different companies, clinics.
yeah,
What does that look like? What's that portfolio
sure.
look like?
Yeah. So my kind of my big clinic, Bhakti Wellness Center. So we're a large integrative clinic. At our peak, we had 31 providers. We had medical doctors, mental health providers, chiropractors, traditional Chinese medicine doctors, hypnotherapy. We had psychics. Like, really a panoply of providers.
Mm,
And what I loved about that, again, part of, like, my day being like a kid in a candy store, was doing grand rounds and sitting at a table with an MD and a DC and a TCM doctor and a nurse and a licensed psychologist and a massage therapist and a Reiki provider and a psychic,
mm,
and talking about a particular patient, and how would each of us in our different professions approach this patient care, and then assembling a team that might be a nurse, an acupuncturist, and a Reiki provider around somebody with chronic depression.
mm.
and
What a team
and
from different perspectives. Wow. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And so, just like how rare that is. Like, having been in integrative medicine for 30 plus years, having worked as a consultant in clinics, I helped set up a integrative clinic at the University of Minnesota, many different places around the country, and to see the vast majority of them never get off the ground.
Mm,
If they get off the ground, they don't last very long, they fail, or they just kind of wind down into this kind of dysfunctional malaise.
mm.
And it's really hard. And again, we could tap into what you talked about in your last show about those kind of cultural differences. And you have a big cultural difference in between an MD and a psychic medium,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
That's a good way to that. That is the end. That's the opposite ends of the spectrum. Yeah, that's a good way to phrase it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to be able to have them sit at a table and have mutual respect that the other is showing up with a valid intelligence
Mm,
that allows them to perceive the world in a unique way, but it's a valuable perception that deserves to be at the table and heard and understood and worked
mm,
with. Um, like that is rare, and so I enjoyed that. I learned so much every time I sat in grand rounds and heard these other minds processing and having commentary on the same patient that I'm looking at, and I think I never would have thought that.
mm,
And then but you also get to map outcomes, right? So it isn't just hearing people's perspectives. You get to see outcomes, and when we see somebody who's had a case that just wasn't moving, and we're using kind of the standard of treatment, and then we bring in a medical qigong provider, or we bring in our hypnotherapist, and all of a sudden that person starts getting better.
hmm.
You just can't say, well, that didn't work, or
Right.
it's clear to everybody at the table was, well, whatever they brought, it was the linchpin that opened up this person and allowed them to move into healing as opposed to suffering.
Mm,
And so seeing that, at scale across hundreds of people over, decades, so that's, tens of thousands of times that we have seen this mechanism work. It tells you that it it's real.
yeah.
There's a real effect in all of these pieces coming together. And so, so that's Bhakti Wellness Center, big
And how do you spell
integrative
that?
clinic.
Ba-
BHAKTI.
oh,
So
oh.
Bhakti, like Bhakti
Yeah, yeah,
yoga.
yeah. Okay, got it.
So, yep. So Bhakti Wellness Center, kind of my big clinic. And then nested within that, I have the Bhakti Brain Health Clinic. So we specialize in bioelectric medicine for brain health. And that clinic's pretty omnivorous. We see a lot of mental health, learning
Mm,
disabilities, uh, a little bit of peak performance, a little bit of traumatic brain injury. We're a very kind of omnivorous clinic. And then I have the Minnesota Brain Health Clinic, which is a Bredesen clinic where we do the Bredesen protocol. So that's Dr. Bredesen, end of Alzheimer's. Um, the, so we use functional medicine and bioelectric
mm,
medicine for the treatment and prevention of dementia. And so we've got a clinic that does that. And then it's kind of an offshoot, or not really an offshoot, just a counterbalance to that is CerebralFit. So CerebralFit is a completely virtual clinic, no brick and mortar. And we do everything brain health. We do bodies as well, but our front customer facing is brains, and probably our biggest population is a dementia population. So dementia, Parkinson's, dystonia, things of that nature. But we do also a lot of macular degeneration, autoimmune conditions, just anything where we can use bioelectric medicine. But it in some ways was a bit of a reaction to. So my partner, Dr. Jeff Drobot, my partner in CerebralFit, he runs a big clinic in Arizona, the Biomed Center, uh, and so we're both longtime clinicians
mm,
with brick and mortar clinics. And we were just talking one day about our passion for bioelectric medicine and the limitation of the clinic to be able to bring the new advances in bioelectric medicine to a broader audience, where you don't need somebody to come to your clinic. You can treat
mm.
them just as effectively or more effectively at home. And then as clinicians, or business owners, you don't necessarily have to have the expense of a building. You don't have to
Yep.
have the expense and the stress of a large staff. It really lets us pare down the infrastructure of healthcare delivery so that we can maximize what's happening on the healthcare consumer side and minimize the delivery
Right,
cost
right, right.
of
Focus the
healthcare. So that's what
resources on the
CerebralFit
patient and
does.
the care, and not the
Yeah.
overhead and infrastructure and HVAC and
Yep.
all the stuff you got. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
All of that
Right,
stuff. Yep.
right.
And then I have a chiropractic clinic where we pretty much just do straight chiropractic only, layered with bioelectric medicine, within the chiropractic paradigm. So, so
How
those
the
are my,
hell, that
all my
sounds like a
clinics.
lot of, what, did you just, I think 5 different, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, that's
Ah,
crazy. Yeah.
it is
Wow.
crazy. I don't
Yeah,
recommend
yeah.
it.
I was gonna say, and you're talking about having, not having the sort of, not having chosen a path of money, or, but I gotta think one of these things is gonna pop, right? I mean, that's the other thing too. You're on this cutting edge of some amazing stuff, right? I gotta imagine there's that, there's always, like anything else. I'm sure you're, and we'll get into some of your devices in a second, but I do think you're taking that sort of entrepreneurial route, not kind of, you are, where
Yeah.
there's always a chance that you land something huge, and right, you followed your passion, and oh, guess what? Now this device is now in every healthcare center or hospital in the world, potentially, right? That's obviously, yeah,
Potentially. And yes, would absolutely. I would love it if any one of these would would pop. That would
yeah,
be great. So far, 30 years in, hasn't happened, but
yeah.
I'm optimistic.
Well,
It could any moment now.
that's one thing I sort of wanted to get to is, and I wrote in my notes here, because I started getting into, I would say, interested in functional medicine, several years ago, and I didn't know what the hell the term meant. I just knew, you know,
Mhm.
I was always into health and fitness, and I'm very much a self sort of, I think individual responsibility is really an important thing, and I'm always thinking, wait, I feel like crap, and they got to want to give me a pill for this, but I've also been eating like crap, drinking way too much, stressed at work, not sleeping. If
Mhm.
I change 2 of those, I feel great. What the? But if I just continue doing those 4 things and taking the pill, I maybe would have felt a little like it just seemed weird, right?
Mhm.
And now I'm not saying anything new, right? But for me, about 4 or 5 years ago, I started thinking in that way, and then everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that's called functional medicine," and I looked into it. Okay,
Right.
what's that? Well, it's doctors maybe that ascribe to more of a different. Let's not just give you a pill or just cut you open. Let's look at what your lifestyle is. Start there, and so
Mhm.
I started looking into that, and I said, "Wow, that makes total sense." Right? I'm getting to my point in a second here. Then I said, well, why the hell isn't this everywhere? Like, this is the first thing a doctor should ask you is, oh, you have
Mhm.
XYZ symptoms. How's your diet? Standard American diet. Okay. Well, you're poisoning yourself every day, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you are. That's what we do. If you
Yeah.
don't know what you're eating, it comes in a big box and it's got a label the size of, okay, what is that? It's not food, right? It's for profit sustenance that they're putting in your body. 2, how's your
Yep.
sleeping? 3, how's your stress? How's your home life? What, are you sleeping, alcohol consumption, whatever it is. Like, if you address those 4 or 5 things, many of us, and I'm not an anti-pharmaceutical person, a lot of folks need what they need,
Yeah.
right? They really do, but many of us don't.
Yep.
So I
Yep.
started thinking, why the hell isn't this functional approach the first gate to anything else? And then, of course, the
Right.
answer is follow the money, follow the incentives. Now, is
Yep.
that a pessimistic way to look at it? No, I think it's realistic. So what I'm getting at
Yep.
is you just said, hey, in 30 years you haven't seen anything pop. Now it could be that it's just not the right product. It's not, the market's not quite right. You got to keep tweaking things, and maybe it'll pop. Or is it that you're sort of paddling upstream against the institution, against standard medicine, against standard incentives? I don't know if that's true. It's a sincere question, but when you
Yeah.
talked about having all those different practitioners in the room, medical doctors, all the way to folks that have
Yep.
the furthest thing from an MD, but the general consensus is the one thing all those folks had in common is they cared for the patient in the center. It's like
Yes.
you would think that would be commonplace, but again, there's not necessarily an incentive structure to allow that to be first and foremost. At least I don't think. So anyway,
No.
what you feel like you're paddling
Yeah.
upstream with your world versus versus the institution and versus the organized medicine?
So definitely
Mm,
yes. Less so. I've certainly seen a massive transition from 35 years ago to
that's
today
good.
in terms of
Good
the
trend. Yeah.
cultural acceptance. Yep. But I would say, just from a business philosophy kind of standpoint, the biggest challenge is systemically it's insurance versus no insurance.
Mm,
if you're in the allopathic system, you have insurance for the most part, not always. Like you could look at aesthetics and what people will pay to have their lips plumped or whatever. So
Right.
people will pay if it means something to them, but they generally won't pay for their health.
Yeah.
And so they want insurance. And so the the system is skewed towards the insurance side, for sure. But that's matched by a cultural mindset that drives it every bit as much. So the average American is more to blame than industry or incentive structures or anything.
Mm.
Like the bottom line, it falls with the healthcare consumer because they, number one, they just don't value their health. And you know that because we've all been raised in, nutritional, like we've been immersed in nutrition, and yet you still see people stuffing their face with
Shit.
processed
Yeah. I
food.
mean, it's
Yeah,
just to be
and
blunt.
and
Yeah.
you go like there's no gap in knowledge here. That person
Right.
knows that that is not food,
Right.
but they sequester that
Yeah.
information in a different part of the brain, and then they do the behavior, and it's bad for them, and they know it, but they don't care, and they move on,
Yep.
right? Like that, like that's the problem.
Mm.
We could yell and scream at the insurance system, and we could yell and scream at incentive structures and all of it, but that all of that is a symptom of the average person's condition.
Mm.
And so even so, because everything you described about functional medicine, you just described Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, systems that have been around, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Indigenous medicine. So this wisdom has been around,
Right.
100%. Right? There's no shortage of it. It's just many cultures, not just our culture, many cultures, uh, we're just resistant as human beings. We're just kind of resistant to doing what's good for us.
Mm.
Like, period. We want to do what we want to do, and we don't want to do what we should do.
Mm.
And and there you go. Like that drives
Yeah,
it.
and and I think I always I have a statement I've made for years. It's like our willpower is only a function of our opportunity. So if I use the example of like you're a celebrity and your willpower to be to be faithful to your significant other is
Sure.
is is under attack every single day by the beautiful
Right.
women or the beautiful men coming to you. Like, so your willpower might be good, you might have all the but you're a fallible human, and the temptations are always there. So it's like you may fall sooner than someone that has none of those opportunities. Food,
Yeah.
50 years ago, even whenever it started the agricultural revolution and all this, even we had the same genome. We want a cookie processed crap still tastes amazing in our brain, but we didn't have them. So we had to just go in the field, pick something, eat a carrot, move on with our day. So, you know,
Hmm.
and going back to the incentives, yeah, I 100% agree with you that individual responsibility at the root of it can overwrite anything the systems can put in place. Individual, right? It really, I'm a true believer in that. And I think that's what you just articulated. But again, the food industries it's all for profit. I mean, so
Yeah.
it's we call food that's not crap organic food. Isn't that crazy? I always blown. Why don't we just call that food? It's just
Right.
food.
Exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
we have to go out of our
And-
way to say we didn't screw that up. We're going to call that organic food and charge you triple because it's not very cost effective to get that to your table. Man, that's a crazy thing that we live in. Now, you could say, well, we've come a long way and there's a lot less hunger in the world. Yeah, that's true. Although there's a balance there to make food cheap and to keep people from starving, but it's also a poison. So anyway, it's
yeah.
interesting. You're right that the individual responsibility. But when I drive by that McDonald's, and I tend to eat mostly healthy, but I know what that thing tastes like, and oh my god, I'm thinking about it now. My mouth's watering. Right? I mean, it's just how they hack the code in our brain. So, I mean, they know
Exactly.
what. Yeah,
That's exactly what has
yeah.
happened. And so I love that you brought up the will piece. It's a favorite topic of
Mm,
mine. Um, I'll keep this tangent very, very short. But one of the things I appreciate about the great tradition, so I mentioned the medical side of it, but I'm a lifelong meditator
Mm,
and fan of the kind of the yoga tradition and the Sankhya yoga tradition in particular. But one of the things that I love about the yoga tradition is they identified this centuries
yeah,
ago, like
they have,
eons
yeah.
ago. And one of the core practices is is the practice of working on one's will. And
Mm,
so built into the very, very early stages, when I say yoga, I don't mean the bendy, stretchy classes. Like, no, like that's not yoga, right? That it's the yoga is this set of
mm,
disciplines. And the first one is working on the will, because I understand that you have to have the energy, you have to have control of the mechanism
yeah.
to put the I want where to put it where you want it to
Mm,
be. It isn't left to chance or whim, or it's not riding on your, neurophysiology or your gastronomics, your
right.
stomach, right? That you, the individual, the subject, have control of this thing called will, and you can put it where you want it, and it stays
Mm,
there. And so this is, like meditation is the disciplining of attention, right?
yeah. Where you put
The
your
the
attention. Yeah.
the so yoga, part of yoga, right? The practice, the disciplining of the will. And so on one level with meditation, you're learning how to put your attention on something and keep it there.
Mm,
And another part of yoga is you're learning how to put your will on something and keep it there. And so we culturally lack any curriculum in this regard. We jettisoned any curriculum
mm,
that we had around this, and we just left it wide open, as if it's like just naturally going to find its path, and we don't ever need to think about it or talk about it. And then we grew a culture that is, again, people out there who said, I can make money by manipulating
right.
these people's will, make it colorful, make it salty, make it sweet, whatever. I can manipulate the
Hmm.
organism and get the outcome I want. And we could follow this tangent right back into our starting
Mm,
conversation
yeah.
around, bioelectric medicine, and again, Michael Levin's work. But we could look at the idea of memes, so not internet memes, but Richard Dawkins
Hmm.
memes. And so we do this, like we're all susceptible to this. So if you think of something like a parasite, and the parasite could be something as simple as a fungus, right? So there's this fungus that will infect an ant, and it'll make the ant climb up to the end of a blade of grass, so that it gets eaten by a mammal that's grazing, because that fungus wants to get into the brain of a
Mm,
mammal. It wants to get where the resources are best, right? So it's driven in that way. And so this poor ant is, really beknownst to it, its will is hijacked, and it crawls up to the blade of grass where it's at greater likelihood of getting
mm,
digested, right? And we see a similar but different fungus in the brains of high performing people. So often, like the research focused on like CEOs, and so some of your most successful CEOs have the highest um, portion or concentration of this fungus. And it's this idea that these people are driven to enact behavior that gets them into the most resource rich circumstance. And that's because the fungus
mm,
wants that. The fungus wants access. So how does the fungus get access? It drives in this case, a person, and not just an ant, but a person, into making the behaviors that gets them to make a lot of money, so that they live a lavish lifestyle and they're well fed, and the fungus is getting what it wants, right? So we can think about this all the way down to that level, that we are being biologically hacked
so I
and
followed your
drives
ant
behavior.
analogy, and there's plenty of those parasitic sort of analogies out there, and they're fascinating when you look into them. Are you saying that there's actually you using metaphor, or there's an actual fungus for the CEO example?
Actual fungus,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. There's some research that came out a little while ago uh, that
give me some of
talked
that.
about this, and again, I'm picking the I'm sensationalizing what the article about the research sensationalized, which was pointing at CEOs
Yeah.
as if, because we all like to bash them.
Right.
Um, but it really is disproportionate across highly successful people. So musician,
Hmm.
athlete, and a person who is driven,
Mm.
uh, that that we see the operation of this fungus. And again, it's not the explanatory reason that everybody who's successful has that. It's just disproportionate.
Hmm.
All anybody who has it, potentially, like anything, like we all are full of funguses and bacteria. We're largely constituted by microbes as
Yeah.
much as we think like we're people. We're mostly microbes. Um, and and so this is not anything all that radical. It's just finding that this particular microbe is disproportionately found in highly successful
Hmm.
people. And its meme effect is to drive what the person thinks is their own will, their own volition, but that volition is actually being driven, essentially by a
Right,
parasite.
right, right. Yeah, I mean, I was wondering, has anyone ever is there anyone working on bottling this thing? I mean, who wouldn't want that, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
right?
That's
Again,
funny. That's what everybody
yeah, let's just
says.
give me some of
Like,
that.
how do
I
I
mean,
get
yeah.
some?
I mean,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, because all these nootropics are out there, and I think when I look through them, the data is all like, yeah, none of this stuff works. I mean,
Mhm,
I don't know. We know caffeine works. We know Adderall works. There's some things that do work, right? They get you moving. But
yep,
those nootropics and all that. I mean, that's an interesting world, But if you could have this fungus that's going to make me want to be more productive, I
mhm,
mean, who wouldn't take that? I mean, you know what I mean? Again, the
yep,
Adderall thing. I think half the people in the freaking world, in the developed world, I feel like are on it. Go to Silicon Valley, go to New York City, go to Washington D.C. I'm in D.C. I know a lot of people on it. They have a lot of energy at 5:30 in the morning, and they're crushing it. And it's not generally because they got a good night's sleep. There's something else going on there, right? It's the intellectual steroid, if you will. That's what folks in
mhm,
my world kind of call it, and it's true. It is true. But so the real thing, I wanted to get into, and I think this is mostly in the category of your CerebralFit company. Now, you look at all the devices you have, and you see these. I get images of sharper image, and you put the thing on your head, and you got the infrared flashing, and my first reaction, to be a little honest here, is like, come on, man, really? Right? When I first started looking you up, like, okay, come on.
yep,
And then, of course, I'm like, all right, well, open minded, let's dig into this, and you start looking into it. You guys, the science is there. I mean, there's a lot of legitimate. And I started going, oh
mhm,
shit, okay. Well, again, why isn't this taking off like more than? Why am I
mhm,
thinking, relatively open minded person? My first reaction was, oh come on, man, really? When it should have been, oh wow, why don't I have one in my home? Because I mean, or whatever, right? I'm not just to
yep,
oversell out of the gate here, but there seems to be an enormous amount of actual foundational science behind electrical and light therapy and everything that you guys are going on there. So I guess little background on these devices and how where you guys
sure.
are with them and what the science behind it is and how effective are these?
Yeah. So maybe we'll just do just a quick rundown just to kind of get a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
context set.
Please.
So we have our near infrared helmet. And it isn't just light, it's light, but it can be programmed to pulse in really any frequency, but mostly we work in the known brain waves, so in the delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. So it does both light and entrainment. And then we have our audiovisual entrainment device, which is photic entrainment, auditory entrainment, and transcranial stimulation. We have our nasal light, and the nasal light also comes with ear lasers. So we have nasal lasers and ear lasers, which is exactly that. It's just lasers you stick in your nose and lasers you stick in your ear that can do continuous light or pulsed light. And then we have a mouth guard. So we've got a red mouth guard, a red blue mouth guard, and a red near infrared mouth guard. So that's just to get light into the oral cavity. And we have a panel set. So we have blue, red, near infrared, and then one that is just red, near infrared. And then we have a microcurrent device for delivering alternating current stimulation or direct current stimulation to the body for all the
Mm,
reasons that that's good. So body or brain
gotcha.
can be used. And we call that, it's kind of the digital pharmacy.
Right.
Is it's not like a tens that just kind of gives you four frequencies. It's a highly complex device that you program like a computer that can have thousands of effects in the body, changing the bioelectric gradient at the cellular level, and getting the body to do more of what we want and less of what we
Mm.
don't want. So these are our devices that we have chosen. And the only way that a device makes it into the CerebralFit lineup is if it's proven itself in the clinic. So in my clinic, in Dr. Robot's clinic, we have to have seen it have positive effects in our patient base, and that it's reliable, predictable outcomes. And then we'd consider moving it into the CerebralFit lineup. Because again, for me, at the end of the day, I'm not a salesperson. But I do sell things.
Yeah.
I'm not a device manufacturer, although we do make some of our own devices now. I'm a healthcare provider, and my first and foremost concern is about the well-being of my client and getting them the healthcare outcome that they
Mm.
want. And so whatever I do has to work. If it doesn't work, I don't want to do it. I'm just not interested. You can't deliver healthcare in
Mm.
that way. So I start as a healthcare provider. My primary role with my people that I work with is as a healthcare provider. These just happen to be the tools that I use, but we're not limited to this, right? Like in our Bredesen clinic, we use functional medicine. Absolutely, we use allopathic medicine in lab tests and blood tests and do all of it. So nothing is left out. But my particular um, piece is the bioelectric medicine. So I tend to talk
Mm.
about that. So those are the devices that we currently in our lineup. And so if we go back to light, and I was the same as you, when a provider in my own clinic came to me and said, Guy, I want to start doing light therapy, and told me about what she was going to do, my reaction was like, really? Is that a thing?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, honest, it's a thing. And I'm like, let me look into that. And then I went and looked, and I was like, oh, wow, there's a whole long list of NIH studies on this showing that low level light therapy and LED light has a medicinal effect. It has a biological effect. I had no idea. So yeah, my mind went from no to yes, and it went there just because I looked at the research. And you're like, okay, like these are world class researchers at the best
Yeah.
institutions around the world. There's 40 years of research, hundreds of thousands of studies. I like it's not a debate, right? And that was like me moving, within myself from this isn't a thing to this is a
Right.
thing, because you just look at it. But then I started to use it, and that was the real, thing that convinced me as a practitioner was, oh, by bringing this into my practice, my people are getting better faster. Conditions I couldn't change before are changing, or conditions I could work on, but it might take me in my kind of orthopedic side, it might take me 6 months to resolve this condition. And now I'm able to do it in
Mm.
2 months, and the outcome is better. That was the real, like, okay, the research is there, great, but the proof is in the pudding. They work. And the kind of the way I explain it is, especially for the light, this is mostly true for the light, is basically what we're talking about here is human photosynthesis. And we think about photosynthesis being for plants and not for people. And we don't really, like I've never thought like, oh, I want to go buy a new plant for the garden. I wonder if it'll work. Like I've never had that question, right? Like you buy the
Yeah.
plant, you give it some water and some nutrients, and it lives. Like for the most part, like that 100% of the time, plants
Mm.
photosynthesize. They take light energy and turn it into food and oxygen, and
Yeah.
just that, right? And none of us really question that. So when we look at like our human bodies do the same thing with the sun. We take sun energy and turn that into a bioavailable energy, and and that's kind of like
Mm.
that's it. Now there is a little bit of a like plants put off oxygen, the human body will put off free radicals from that process. So this is where the pairing of grounding, earthing, so putting bare feet on the ground, and then sunlight, what happens is we become a
Mm.
battery. That process of charging your battery with the sun, 100%, it literally works like that. There's about 1,400 different chemical products we produce by getting sunlight. The most known one is vitamin
Hmm.
D. Right? You go out in the sun and you produce vitamin D, and so that's true, but for many many more substances in the body. So we're like life evolved to work with
Hmm.
photons as energy sources, and not just energy. They do more than energy. They're forms of communication within the body. They have a lot of function. So what we do in light therapy is probably the most medicinal bandwidths of light right now are red and near infrared. The science is showing us that the most benefit comes from this, from between something like 600 and 1,000 nanometers, right in there. So visible red to invisible red. Um, and basically, what we've done is we've taken out the ones that tend to be more harmful at longer exposures, and longer being more than a minute. So your UV
Yeah.
rays, your blues. So we eliminate those, and we just take the ones that are beneficial. We can drive cellular physiology in known, predictable, repeatable ways with that as a mm, again, it's like a pharmaceutical, except that's the chemical side,
Right.
right? So the chemical side is what we do with pharmaceuticals. We're chemical electric beings. So on the electrical side, we can drive our electrophysiology using photons, or if we're going to do stim, using
Mm.
ions. And again, it's really it's physics, it's biology. It's not. There's no woo
Mm.
in here. Yeah.
So when you're just applying these, whatever the signal is,
Mhm.
light photons, electricity, ions, how do you, in other words, is there a dysfunction that you're observing initially where the application of these signals change the notable dysfunction, and how, I guess I have a lot to learn
Yeah.
here, but like, well,
Yep.
how you kind of almost verifying, before and after sort of thing.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. So good question. So I'll just say, so like in there, the main root was this idea of like, is there a problem that you're
Mm, yeah.
fixing, right? And so I mean that's a fine thing, but we'll just say that's allopathic medicine, pathology, right?
Yeah.
And and we think a little bit more on the positivistic side of you're vitalizing the system rather than negating some pathogenic force. So it's like negativistic versus positivistic, and it's not like we don't have to have an either or and one is
Right.
better, but it's just to be kind of clear in the mindset that we're going into. So analogy that I like to use is just going to put it into the real world for a little bit. So just kind of pick like just an average person, just living an average, middle class life, and you have a certain amount of income, and then you have a certain amount of expense, and you hope to kind of keep those two in a relative balance to one another, where your income exceeds your expense um, by some
Hmm.
margin, right? And there we go, right? That's a middle class life. But always, if you look around, a person's home, there are things that haven't been repaired, and it's like, well, that's time and money to do
Mm,
that, and it's not that big of a deal, so you just kind of let it go, right? So it's the hand railing that's loose, it's the, you
right. Right.
name it, right? The screen that's torn, the window that opens kind of sideways, the door that squeaks when you open it. And we have all of these things that kind of grow in our environment that we just don't take care of. Although we don't invest resources in them because we have this sense that resources are
Hmm.
constrained money, right? Time and money, right? So what happens if you take that person and then you increase their income by a meaningful amount, right? So give that person an extra $10,000 a month, right? Well, what's going to happen across the most part, right? Is those things that weren't getting taken care of are going to get taken care of. All of a sudden, the handrail is fixed because you hire somebody to come in and fix it, and the screen is
Hmm.
fixed, and the window opens properly, and all of those things get taken care of. Okay, so that's just same basic thing that we all live, most of us live in our day to day lives. Think of the same thing in the body. So when we take and we put photons in, it's like giving the body money,
Hmm.
right? We're giving it at the lowest, simplest level. We're giving it more energy because red infrared light drives mitochondrial activity, which increases ATP production, and ATP is the
Hmm.
base energy molecule for the body to do everything. So even if we just look at it there, what happens is we give the body more energy. And when it has more energy, it will allocate those resources to get to some of that deferred
Hmm.
maintenance that it hasn't been getting to because we've been in a bit more of a survival mode. Because most of us aren't actually, in terms of our health, we're not living a middle class lifestyle. We're living more of in
Hmm.
poverty. Our debt is exceeding our income, and we're building up a growing and growing debt. And that's our lack of
Hmm.
vitality. That's aging and degeneration and that, right? So if we increase our resources, give our body more resources, it will deploy it for healing and regeneration. Just very simple, without being
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
overthinking it. That's exactly what we see happen. Is we put light in as a resource. Now it doesn't just drive this one function. Like I'll go the next one. So mitochondria. Good research now telling us that mitochondria don't just produce ATP, which is they've always been thought like that's their main thing and why we celebrate them. But it turns out they actually are paramount in cell to cell signaling.
Hmm.
So information processing, information distribution within the broader system. So mitochondria are important for cell signaling. And so driving more cell signaling just means our information processing networks are stronger and more robust, which keeps the whole system on the plot. It
Hmm.
keeps your brain being a brain and your liver being a liver and your kidney being a kidney. And that's what we want. We want those organs and tissues to have the information to keep doing what they're doing the way they're
Hmm.
supposed to do it. So mitochondria is super important in that role. And I could keep going. I mean, there's nitric oxide, there's reactive oxygen species, there's mRNA. So one of my favorites is it optimizes when a cell makes a copy of itself. And so the genome is being rebuilt into a new cell, right? So this RNA transcriptase level that red infrared light optimizes that process. So the chances of genetic repair go up.
Hmm.
Most of the time, the forces of degeneration are leading to errors in the transcriptase process. And so the copy of the gene goes down.
Hmm.
By adding the light, the chances of the copy, the reliability of that gene going up
Hmm.
increases. So we can get genetic repair. So we're having an epigenetic effect at the genetic level. Right? And so there's this long list of benefits that come from it that aren't anti any disease. They're pro the activity of life.
Yeah, make the
Right?
system as strong as possible and increase resilience, increase repair without being very specific about any one of those things. Right? It makes
Correct.
it's almost like, and I don't know if it's a bad analogy or good, but if you're just generally vitamin deficient, if you don't get enough sun, and then you add all those things, you're now taking a really good supplement, or you're eating really good whole foods one day, you just switch and you're getting more sun. That alone would, I would think, increase just general health across all domains. And it sounds like what you're
Yep.
saying is the addition of this light therapy is sort of doing the same thing at the cellular level, just with light. It's not targeting any one thing,
Mm-hmm.
but build the system foundationally, increase the resources, the income, to your analogy. That does make sense. It really does.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then if we kind of touch in again to a little bit of our entry point
Mm.
into this, where we were talking about again Michael Levin's work, but also this idea of agency and communion. This idea. So Michael Levin's theory, what he calls TAME, technological approach to mind everywhere,
Mm.
is this idea that mind goes all the way down. Mind is not just a human or even an low level like animal. And you have to have a cortex to be able to have a mind. This understanding, and it's not just his work. I mean, it's growing, there's more and more evidence to support it across the different scientific disciplines. So you've got this happening in chemistry, you have this happening in physics, where they're starting to show that there's a testable, trainable intelligence all the way
Mm.
down. So if we accept this, then we say that our cells have agency, they have intelligence. And then the individual cells that come together to form a tissue. So maybe it's a nephron in a kidney or whatever, right? So we've got a structure. That structure has an
Yeah.
intelligence on how to be the best, whatever it is. Like my liver has an intelligence to be the best liver that it can be. So if we give the resources and allow the local intelligence to deploy them, we get much better results than if we try and
Mm.
micromanage it, right? And that's largely what you see happening on the pharmaceutical side. They want to get
Mm.
more and more targeted to use a chemical intervention to go in and force change in like the smallest possible uh, interaction that they could do. And part of that is good because when you have a strong change agent that has can have a broad effect, that's where you get your side effects,
Yeah.
because you change chemical reactions happening in the body in places you didn't want to change
Right.
them, but you pay that price to change the ones you do. So as they get more and more targeted, which is great, less side effects, but more powerful change, but they're going in and they're kind of forcing the change. And so the intelligence is in the mind of the scientist who says, I think this is what needs to be done here. Or then it's in the
Mm.
mind of the doctor who prescribes the chemical to say, I think your system needs to be forced in this direction.
Almost
What we're
overriding the
saying,
individual intelligence at the cellular level, where I think if I'm hearing you
exactly.
right, your approach is let's let's give the intelligence at the cellular level the greatest amount of resources to start with and let it do its natural thing. Is that as opposed to the pharmaceutical approach where it's like let's come in strategically try to override some of that individual intelligence with our own quote unquote intelligence to fix a certain is that what I heard you say?
Yep, you got it. Exactly
That's
that. Yep.
brilliant. I
Yep.
love that
And
analogy. That really resonates. That makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And so we see this again, this is not a novel concept. We see this in the traditional forms. When if you I'm trained as an acupuncturist, worked as an acupuncturist for a number of years, but decided I didn't really like sticking needles in people. So I kind of let it go as a practice, but I love the
Yeah.
theory. And this is very much in the theory of Chinese medicine or homeopathy, in many forms, where they're oriented at working with the intelligence. So in Chinese medicine, that would be the
Mm.
qi. And so you're working with the qi, the local intelligence, and it's often translated as energy. And we again think about in our reductionist Western way as it's just electricity like is running through the wires in my
Right.
house, right? And an acupuncture point is a light switch, and I flip the switch and energy runs down this pathway. No, sure, that sort of works at a very low resolution map. But if we start to think about it as it's an intelligence, and what I'm doing is bringing an intelligence into an area because that area has kind of lost the plot and it needs to be brought back into the kind of the group
Mm.
mind of that area. Then I bring in the resource of intelligence. It kind of reminds that local milieu of what it's supposed to be doing. And we see it, health emerges, where we never took on a pathological force, right? So, like Chinese medicine doesn't really have pathologies in
Mm.
it, not the way we do in the West. They have this idea of the loss of an intelligence. And but what I love about Michael Levin's work is he's showing this in a Western paradigm, but but he's also able to do things that the traditional forms would say is possible, but nobody can actually
Mm.
do. But there's a theory for it, right? They can perfectly look and say, "Oh, so you're saying you could regrow an arm, right?" And then somebody in Chinese medicine or somebody in osteopathy would say, like, "Yes." Like our theory says we could do it. We just don't have anybody who actually can. But then you bring in Michael Levin, who wouldn't, in no way would I say he's using Chinese medicine theory or osteopathic theory. He's doing his own thing, but the maps line up perfectly. The difference is when he says, I want to regrow a leg in an animal that doesn't regrow a leg, or, in this case, a frog, he can regrow the leg. He turns on the subroutine for grow leg here. 14 months later, there's a leg. He says grow an eye here, and a tadpole will grow an eye on the tail that will be wired in to the brain and works and can use as an eye. And he's gotten to a point where like they can predict what ion channels need to be changed to bring about the thing that you want to bring about. Change those ion channels, and then step back and watch the native intelligence do the job without any micromanaging.
Yeah.
Right? When he says like, grow an eye here, he's not in there saying, well, now I need a lens and I need a second level
Right.
of a
Right. Right.
lens and then I need some vitreous fluid, and in there doing that, he's just like, nope, subroutine, grow an eye here, and the intelligence of the organism already knows how to make an eye. So it just sets about making an eye. And it will grab local tissue that is maybe supposed to be muscle tissue and say, hey, come here. I need you to be an eye cell. And it can recruit that non-eye tissue into participating in the
Yeah.
development of an eye. And it does that by changing the local intelligence, the mind around that cell. And so this approach, I think, is going to be a very promising part of medicine. And again, he's already shown it in his work in cancer. And cancer is basically healthy cells that have become disconnected from the local mind. And so he's been able to show that you can take healthy cells, disconnect them, they'll form a tumor, they'll move on to be just like cancer. You can take that cancer tumor that you just created and you can reattach it to the local mind, and it will go back to being normal cells.
Wow.
And then repeat that back and forth, back and forth. Tumor, no tumor, tumor, no tumor in the same animal, just on, off, on, off.
That's
And
crazy.
and so that holds great
Mm.
promise for future treatments of cancer, and certainly that they are working on that. And they're in an
Mm.
animal model showing regrowing a limb in an animal as opposed to an amphibian. Now they're into an animal model and having success. So there's a lot of there in what he's doing, but what he's doing is not different than what the traditions have held for thousands of years. So what we do in bioelectric medicine is we try and leverage that same system of intelligence, but using electroceuticals instead of pharmaceuticals or nutraceuticals. So diet would be nutraceuticals, pharmacological medicine would be
Mm.
pharmaceuticals. We use electroceuticals to change the electrical gradient at the cellular and tissue level to kind of remind the system of what it's supposed to be doing, and kind of talk
It's
it out
fascinating.
of the pathology that it
Yeah,
was
I mean, you
doing.
just proved the point that this is not just mumbo jumbo. This is legit science, reproducible in lab data. True scientists. And it's. I mean, there's so many things we could unpack there. We just don't have the time, unfortunately. But I sense a part two. I'm gonna propose that here. Because there's so many questions, and I got to wrap this up, unfortunately. But I mean, the one thing, and I'll just end with this. I want to
Yep,
give you a chance to let folks know where they can find you. But I've been so fascinating lately with how you know having a designer of the universe can coexist with the evolutionary theory. I don't think the two are incompatible. I just don't. Right. I just don't. I
absolutely.
know that's where it gets controversial, and yes, I'm a Christian, so obviously I have a want to look at that side, but I'm also a data science geek, and I want to. Obviously, adaptation is a real thing. We just know it. Anyway, one phrase you said. You said intelligence. We said intelligence so many times at the cellular level. I mean, so it's like,
Yep.
man, and the more we learn about how these little tiny individual, these cells are, we keep going deeper and deeper, deeper, and we don't. we don't get to the point where we say, oh, that's just a little dumb little thing. It just keeps getting more and more complex the further we look in, which is,
Yes.
it's just fascinating. I don't know where this will end someday,
Yeah.
but man, it's really cool. And it sounds like everything you're talking about, you're completely harnessing and leveraging and relying on that science, so.
Absolutely. I think kind of what you were, kind of obliquely pointing to there, in there being kind of an
Yeah.
intelligence and maybe something around design and intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I think anybody who spends enough time in anything like kind of what I do, anything dealing with living organisms, I, I I don't know how that can't be the the awareness that comes from it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I say that sitting in rooms with people who do something similar to what I do, um, and do not have that perspective at all. Like they completely would argue that as an incorrect conception. Um, but again, I would say I think anybody who's really paying attention to what they're doing, this is an inescapable realization that we're dealing with intelligent, like life is intelligent all the way down. And I believe the research that tells us that it isn't just life. If we skip past biology and we go into chemistry, there's research that shows that chemical reactions have an
Mm-hmm.
intelligence. You can put up barriers and they will figure out ways around the barrier to do what they want to do. And similarly at the level of physics. And so, yeah, I think we're not far away from this being just an accepted fact that we bake into our science, and we begin to operate on it as just another
Mm.
principle. Law of thermodynamics is that there's intelligence and it can be
Yeah,
worked with.
not just necessarily random evolution of over billions and billions of years to get to this point. There has to. It just doesn't seem. I don't want to get into it. I could go on for this all day. I mean, it's
Yeah,
so
I know
fascinating.
we got
But
to
we're going to do a part two.
write
Yeah,
down
we're going to
that
do a
thought.
part two because
Write down.
this is
Yeah,
one of those episodes where I took more notes that I got unanswered as you were talking so which is an amazing. That's a great sign, by the way. So it's fascinating. So let's wrap this up. Where can folks find you?
sure. Yep. So
Okay,
cerebralfit.com. So cerebralfit.com. And at cerebralfit.com, they will find my direct phone number, my direct email. There's a link to my schedule. They can go in and book a free consult. We have an extensive amount of research. I really am a big believer in just put the
yeah,
information out there. Let the consumer have a chance to educate themselves. Like as we talked about, I mean, all of that we do stands on decades of science from around the world. So I have nothing to kind of hide or be bashful about. So I just put it
yeah,
all out there. We have a number of articles that are written. So we have a medical writer who takes kind of some of the science and brings it down to a level that just a person could read as a more conversational level. But I also put up the links to the studies themselves so people can go as deep as they
cool,
want.
yeah,
So cerebralfit.com, you can find me, you can find all of our products, you can find all of the research. Yeah, and if people are interested, like I say, we do a free 15-minute consult. I'd be delighted to
very
talk with
cool,
them
yeah.
about how biological medicine might be able to
I
help
mean, there's
them.
folks that are struggling with at whatever level. It doesn't seem like adding this extra step has any downside. I mean, right?
No
Why
downside.
not see what it does? Yeah,
Exactly.
interesting. Guy, thank you so much.